3 helicopters had already gone in. All 3 came back without the team, their fuselages punched through with bullet holes, one of them carrying a dead crewman. Whatever was waiting on the ground out there, in the dense jungle west of a place called Loch Ninh, was tearing apart everything that came near it. A 12-man reconnaissance team was down there, surrounded, and by every reasonable measure they were already lost. And then a 4th helicopter lifted off. On board was a man who had not been ordered to go, who was not even part of the mission, who carried no rifle, only a medical bag and a knife. His name was Benavidez. 6 hours later, he would have 37 separate wounds in his body, from bullets, from shrapnel, and from a bayonet. And 8 men who should have died in that jungle would be alive. For one reason, he refused to stop getting up. This is the story of those 6 hours. And I want to be clear from the start about what kind of story it is, because it is not the one you are expecting. This is not a story about a single brave act, a moment of courage, a few seconds where a man made a hard choice and it was over. There are 1,000 of those, and they are extraordinary. This is something different and in its own way harder to comprehend. This is the story of a man who was shot and then got up and was shot again and got up again and was hit by shrapnel and stabbed and shot once more and kept getting up for 6 straight hours, long past the point where any human body should have simply quit. By the end, you are going to be counting the wounds with me, and you are going to stop understanding how he was still standing. So let's start with who he was, because nothing in his beginning predicted any of this. Benavidez was born in 1935 in Cuero, Texas, the son of a Mexican-American father and a Yaqui mother. He lost both parents young, grew up poor, and left school as a boy to work in the fields, the kind of childhood that taught hardship early and offered very little in return. He knew prejudice, the casual, grinding kind aimed at a brown-skinned kid in that time and that place. None of it broke him. He joined the army and he kept pushing, further than anyone watching that barefoot field hand would ever have guessed, until he earned the Green Beret of the United States Army Special Forces. He had already survived one serious wounding earlier in the war, a landmine that doctors thought would leave him unable to walk. He walked out of that hospital through sheer stubbornness, and he went back. Hold that detail, because the stubbornness is the whole man. It is the thing that is about to be tested past any reasonable limit. Now the mission. On the 2nd of May 1968, a 12-man reconnaissance team was inserted into thick jungle west of Loch Ninh, an area firmly controlled by the North Vietnamese Army. This was not an ordinary patrol. The team belonged to the most secret kind of work in the entire war, a reconnaissance element gathering intelligence on a major enemy buildup, the sort of small, deniable team that slipped into ground where the war was not officially being fought. 9 of the 12 men were montagnards, indigenous fighters from Vietnam's highlands, men whose loyalty and skill in that jungle were the equal of anyone's. And almost as soon as they were on the ground, they realized they had landed on top of something enormous. They were not facing a patrol. They were facing a North Vietnamese infantry battalion, something close to 1,000 men, and that battalion was closing in around them. The team called for emergency extraction, and this is where the helicopters come in. 3 of them tried to reach the team and pull them out, and 3 of them were driven off by a wall of enemy fire so intense that they could not even land. Men were already dead and dying on the ground. The radio traffic coming back was the sound of a team being slowly surrounded and destroyed, with no way to reach them. By any cold military calculation, those men were gone. You do not keep throwing aircraft and crews into fire like that for a team that is almost certainly already lost. Benavidez was not on that mission. He was back at the base, listening to the whole thing unfold over the radio. And listening to it was unbearable to him because he knew those men. So when that 4th helicopter prepared to make another run at the impossible, Benavidez did something that tells you everything about him before he ever fired a shot. He grabbed a medical bag, and with nothing but a knife on him, no rifle, no plan beyond reaching his friends, he jumped aboard. Understand what that decision was. He was not ordered to go. He was choosing voluntarily to be inserted into a clearing surrounded by 1,000 enemy soldiers that had already chewed up 3 helicopters armed with a blade and a bag of bandages. The hook of this story is not the battle that follows. It is the moment a man in a safe place chose, with no obligation at all, to step into hell for people he was not going to leave behind. The helicopter brought him in near the trapped team, and the 6 hours began. The first thing he had to do was reach them, and they were about 75 meters away across open, fire-swept ground. Benavidez ran it. The enemy fired at him the entire way, and before he even reached the team, he had already been hit in the head, in the face, and in the leg. He did not stop. He got to the men, and instead of collapsing, he took command. Wounded already, Bleeding from his head and his leg, he began treating the casualties, dragging the wounded together, organizing the survivors, calling in and directing fire to keep the closing enemy back. He repositioned men. He recovered classified documents from the team so they would not fall into enemy hands, and he kept moving through fire that should have killed him several times over. That is the first hour. He is already carrying wounds that would put most men on the ground for good, and the battle has barely started. And then it got worse, in the way that this entire day kept finding new ways to get worse. A helicopter came in to start lifting the wounded out, and for a moment it looked like the rescue might actually work. Then the pilot was killed, and the aircraft crashed. At nearly the same instant, a grenade went off close to Benavidez, driving shrapnel into his back, and he was shot in the stomach. Take a second to picture his condition at this point. He has been shot in the leg, the head, the face, and the stomach, and torn by grenade shrapnel, and the helicopter that was his way out is now a wreck on the ground. Most stories of courage would have ended several wounds ago. His did not. He pulled the survivors from the crashed helicopter, organized them into a defensive perimeter, redistributed ammunition, and called in airstrikes danger close around their own position to hold the enemy off until another aircraft could try. He was, by now, barely able to stand. He kept standing anyway. There is a question that hangs over every part of this story, and it is worth asking out loud. What keeps a man moving through that much pain, through that many wounds, when every instinct and every nerve is screaming at him to lie down and let it end? For Benavidez, the answer seems to have been brutally simple. As long as there was one wounded man still on that ground who might be saved, lying down was not an option he would allow himself. He was not trying to be a hero. He was just refusing to leave anyone behind, and he would pay any price his own body could be made to pay before he broke that rule. I am going to stop here for one moment, because what this man did deserves more than to scroll past, and the only way stories like his keep being told is if you help tell them. If a man with 37 wounds refusing to leave 8 others to die is the kind of history you think more people should actually know, then stop right now and subscribe and leave his name, Benavidez, in the comments. The algorithm buries this kind of story unless people tell it not to, and that one tap is the difference between this reaching someone new and disappearing. Do it now, because the next part is almost impossible to believe, and it is true. The fighting went on. At one point, an enemy soldier came at Benavidez in close combat and clubbed him, and Benavidez was bayoneted. He fought the man off on his own and kept going. He took more rounds. He was, by the end, a catalog of injuries that reads like it belongs to several different men. And still he kept loading the wounded, kept directing fire, kept refusing to be the reason anyone was left behind, until at last a helicopter got in and the survivors, all of them, were lifted out of that jungle. 6 hours. 37 separate wounds from bullets, shrapnel, and a bayonet. 8 men alive who would not have been. And Roy Benavidez, finally out of fight, his body shutting down. Which brings us to the single most extraordinary moment in the whole story. And it did not happen in the jungle. It happened back at the base. When they got Benavidez in, he was so badly wounded, so still, so far gone that the doctors examined him and concluded he was dead. They began to put him into a body bag. He could not move, he could not speak. He could not signal in any of the usual ways that there was still a man inside that ruined body. And as the doctor leaned in to zip the bag closed over his face, Benavidez did the only thing left to him that he could control. He spat in the doctor's face. That was it. That was the entire message. I am still here. It was enough. The doctor stopped, realized this man was somehow impossibly alive, and Roy Benavidez was pulled back from inside a body bag and sent to surgery instead of the morgue. He had refused to stop getting up so many times that day that he refused even to be dead. He survived. And here is where the story takes its second cruel turn, the part that most tellings rush past, and it is the part that says the most about him. For what he did that day, Benavidez was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, a very high honor. But the men who knew what had happened believed it was not high enough, that what he had done deserved the Medal of Honor itself, and there was a problem. To upgrade the award to the Medal of Honor, the Army required an eyewitness account from someone who had been on the ground and seen it with their own eyes. Benavidez believed there was no one left to give it. He thought the men closest to the worst of the fighting had died, and so for years the recognition simply did not come. 13 years passed. Roy Benavidez lived an ordinary life with an extraordinary body full of scars, and the highest honor stayed just out of reach for the simple, bureaucratic reason that no one could prove what everyone knew. And then came the kind of twist that if you wrote it into a film, an audience would roll their eyes. One of the men from that day, a radio operator named Brian O'Connor, whom Benavidez had believed was killed, was alive. He was living in the Fiji Islands. And in 1980, he happened to read a newspaper story about Roy Benavidez that had been published all the way over in Australia. The man Roy thought was dead on the other side of the world recognized the name, realized what was at stake, and came forward. O'Connor wrote a detailed account, around 10 pages, of exactly what he had witnessed in that jungle. It was the eyewitness testimony the Army had needed for 13 years. And on the strength of it, on the 24th of February, 1981, President Ronald Reagan placed the Medal of Honor around the neck of Roy Benavidez. Before the ceremony, Reagan reportedly told the press that if the story of Benavidez's heroism were a movie script, no one would believe it. He was right. Everything about it sounds invented. The man with a knife and a medical bag, the 75-meter run through fire, the 37 wounds, the body bag and the spit, the witness who reappeared from a Pacific island after 13 years. None of it reads like real life, and all of it is real. Roy Benavidez lived until 1998, and he spent his later years speaking to young people, especially kids who came from where he came from, telling them that no matter how poor or how overlooked they were, their lives could mean something. A barefoot, orphaned field hand from Cuero, Texas, of Mexican and Yaqui blood, became one of the most decorated soldiers his country ever produced. Not because he killed, but because he would not let other men die. And there is one last thread worth pulling, because it leads somewhere this channel has to go. Remember who was on that team he refused to abandon. 9 of those 12 men were not Americans at all. They were Montagnards, the indigenous people of Vietnam's highlands, who fought America's secret war beside the Special Forces with a loyalty that cost them everything. They were some of the most effective and most faithful allies the United States had in that entire war. And when the war ended, they were left behind to face the consequences almost alone. Benavidez crossed 1,000 enemy soldiers to save men his own country would later forget. Who those mountain people were, why they fought, and what happened to them when the Americans went home is one of the most quietly heartbreaking stories of the whole war. And it is the one we are going to tell next.